Morning and warm welcome everyone to this Build Back Better webinar. I can already see participants are lively this morning and commenting on the chat. Please keep on introducing yourselves to each other and keep the chat going throughout the webinar, adding and sharing resources as other viewers find that really useful. There will be colleagues from Union Learn also adding some useful links to resources and publications throughout the session. So just keep an eye on the chat column on the sort of right-hand side of your screens for those useful links and resources. You'll also find at the bottom of your screen an Ask Questions button. Please feel free to add some of your questions in here and we will try and get around to answering them towards the end of today's webinar. We have Yusuf running the technical support for today's session, and I'd like to apologize in advance for any possible issues that may occur with either audio or visual. With broadband capacity still being an issue with so many working from home, these things can happen and we can assure you that we'll try and sort them out as quickly as they occur. Right, okay, well that's the housekeeping done for today's webinar. Now I would like to introduce today's content to you. The impact of coronavirus on ways of work and on the economy has meant many workers are now at risk of redundancy. Others are finding work changing or thinking about new skills and career options. Unions have experienced that helping people gain skills, change roles, or handle redundancy. Today, we will look at the TUC's new jobs protection and upskilling plan, highlight a range of new skills and recovery resources for reps and workers, and give you an insight into union workplace strategies to support workers at risk or changes to ways of working. Just to give you a bit more background, at the start of lockdown, Union Learn developed the Learning at Home campaign to inspire workers to take up home learning and to make the most of these challenging times by improving their skills. The campaign brings together a wide range of learning resources and opportunities that can be accessed from the Union Learn website. And these include bite-sized e-learning modules, skills audits, career information, and online learning opportunities. And this online offer has proved extremely popular with Union learners. Today is the launch of Union Learn's Autumn Festival of Learning, which will run from now until the end of November, with the aim of supporting and motivating union learning reps and inspiring learning throughout the months ahead. The festival will feature virtual regional supporting learners events, webinars on a range of learning topics, create your own future e-briefing sessions, making use of the new online career adaptability tool that's been developed by Union Learn, and interactive virtual learning sessions. Skills and recovery will be a key theme of the festival, as many workers need support at this challenging time to help get a job, change roles, or simply get ahead with their careers. Learning and skills development will play a vital part in the road to recovery, which we will hear more about in today's webinar. So we're joined by 3 speakers today. First up, we have Kate Bell. Kate is the head of the Rights International Social and Economics Department at the TUC, which leads on work on boosting employment rights, promoting social and economic policies that benefit working people, and building international solidarity. And Kate is also a member of the Low Pay Commission representing workers. So welcome, Kate. Glad you could join us this morning. Next, we have Ian Murray. Ian is Union Learn's strategy manager and is responsible for managing strategy and policy work on learning and skills, including all aspects of work-based learning for adults and young people and wider education policy issues. So welcome, Ian. And last but no means least, we have Carol Hillaby. Carol is a project worker for the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union. She has worked with BFAWU for 16 years and has a lot of experience in dealing with redundancy situations, working mainly in the south of the country. So welcome, Carol. Okay, let's get into the meat of the webinar. And first I have a question for Kate. The TUC has recently launched a new job protection and upskilling plan. Kate, what are the key elements of the plan?
Thanks, Ian. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. It's really nice to be here. So our jobs protection and upskilling plan is really meant to replace the furlough scheme. We know the furlough scheme and the self-employed income support scheme, which unions fought for, have done really important work protecting jobs. 9 million people on the furlough scheme, 3 million people on the self-employed scheme. Not perfect, but definitely have helped save jobs, keep people in work and keep those vital skills in place. The job retention scheme is now due to come to an end in October, and the second set of grants for self-employed people finished. That deadline has now passed, basically, and we think we desperately need a new scheme. We're already seeing job losses mounting. Some figures out from the Office for National Statistics last week showed that there's 700,000 fewer people on payrolls, so probably that many fewer people in work already since the start of March. And just in September, we've seen job losses in Virgin, in Lloyds, in Pizza Hut, right across the economy, and you and your members will know just how tough it feels right now. So we've said, okay, the Chancellor said he's not going to extend furlough. What can we put in its place, basically? So that's what our jobs protection and upskilling scheme does. And basically, it's got 4 features which are a little bit different from what furlough looked like. So first of all, we'd say, okay, furlough is open to everybody, but this should be explicitly open to businesses which can show they've been affected by the coronavirus restrictions. So whether you have to show that a proportion of the business turnover has been hit, or perhaps you're in a local lockdown, there'd be some kind of entry barrier to say, yes, basically, we really need this cash. Secondly, we want this to be a kind of classic short-time working scheme, basically. So it's supporting people who are back at work. We've said maybe you could set a threshold that people would have to be doing 10% of their normal working hours, but there's some debate about that. Actually, business organisations are saying people should have to be back at work 50% of their working hours, but I think you could debate, what would be a sensible point to say, yes, this is supporting people to work, but they can't work their full working hours. Third element of the scheme, really important that it actually supports skills as well. So we think if you're working less than half your normal time, you should be offered a funded skills placement brokered by the National Retraining Scheme, which Ian's going to talk about in a minute. And we think it's really important that we use this time when, people may have more time on their hands because businesses can't operate at full capacity, to actually use it to upskill people. And one of the criticisms that, the furlough scheme sometimes had is, why are we paying people to sit at home, and why are we paying jobs to survive, jobs to keep going, which are going to disappear in the future? We don't accept those criticisms, but we do think actually we've needed an investment in skills. People desperately want that investment in skills for a really long time. Why don't we take this opportunity to do that and actually invest in the kind of skills upgrade we've known we've needed for a long time? So that's the third element. And then the last element, which would be a bit different from the furlough scheme, is we think this support should come with strings attached, basically. So businesses shouldn't be able to get these vast sums from government and carry on treating their workers badly. So we've said to get access to the scheme, businesses should have to set out a fair pay plan, a decent jobs plan, which would include banning the use of 0 hours contracts. They should have a plan to pay their tax in the UK. And importantly, while they're using the scheme, they wouldn't be able to make redundancies. So we've put this plan out there. We've sent it to the Treasury. We've tried to talk about it in the news as much as possible. At our Congress this week, we were debating it. We think there's support out there for it, but what we really need now is the government to take this up, because we think this could deliver the support we desperately need to protect jobs, the skills upgrade we've all been arguing for a really long time, but also that kind of push to businesses to say, if you're getting the support from government, you need to be doing better by your workers too.
Great, thanks, Kate, and thanks very much for that sort of clear overview of the new scheme. And it's absolutely vital that we do have this sort of targeted scheme in place, and that we don't end up with a sort of cliff edge at the end of October and nothing replacing the job protection scheme. So thanks for that. And I know sort of Ian will be picking up on some of the skills issues and investment in skills during this webinar, and that nicely brings me on to the next question. And Ian, and this one's directed at an important group that's been affected by this crisis, and they are apprentices. Ian, what challenges are apprentices experiencing from the impact of COVID-19?
Oh, thanks, Ian. And just so good morning, colleagues. Good to be on this webinar. Really important message I think we're trying to send out today. On apprenticeships, I mean, I think there's two key challenges. I mean, the first one is self-evident, the impact on existing apprentices, ranging from the problems COVID has created for them being able to either continue their training, complete their apprenticeship, and the worst of all scenarios, apprentices being made redundant on a daily basis. The second challenge is around sort of the impact of COVID and the recession on employers actually recruiting new apprentices. We've seen a huge decline in the number of new apprenticeship starts. Since lockdown, the numbers down by over a half if you compare it with the equivalent kind of period last year. So there's a kind of double whammy effect going on, really tough time for apprentices out there at the moment, and also many fewer opportunities for young people and adults to take up apprentices in the current recession. I'll say a little bit more about existing apprentices. Obviously, many of them are facing the worst outcome of all, which they've basically been made redundant. Yeah, and actually some of them, they've been training for, more than for months and years in some scenarios, and they're losing their apprenticeship. They're leaving, not just losing a job, but they're actually sort of it's a huge sacrifice because they've lost all that training and they don't actually have anything when they come out of it. So a number one priority for TUC Union Learn is how can we actually safeguard as many apprentices as possible from actually losing their jobs, made redundant, and actually being able to actually complete their apprenticeship. It's a real concern, as Kate mentioned, that the number of redundancies of workers and apprentices is likely to escalate as we run up to that cliff edge of the job retention scheme being closed down. So, an immediate commitment by government to build on the job retention scheme by sort of instituting something along the lines of what TUC is proposing and what Kate just referred to, the new program, which will have a kind of central skills element to it. It's the most immediate thing we can do to actually save as many apprentices as possible from being made redundant in the coming weeks. Lots of apprentices are still on furlough, especially in sectors that have felt the brunt of the recession, and there's a likelihood that they're quite often they're at the front of the queue when redundancies come up. There is some support. The government does offer some support for apprentices who are at risk of redundancy, and they've set up a new redundancy support service, and they have a commitment to try and actually get apprentices who are made redundant transferred to a new employer wherever possible. But the reality is that this is simply not achievable for apprentices. And one of the things the TUC is calling on the government is just to establish a cast iron guarantee that all apprentices, regardless of their circumstances, will be enabled to complete their apprenticeship and won't have to lose out on all that training. We're also calling for some other flexibilities, for example, like flexibilities to the apprenticeship levy, to try and actually help employers boost the number of new apprentices that they're able to recruit. So we have been doing a bit of campaigning on this in recent weeks to actually sort of safeguard apprentices and to boost numbers being recruited. And we're doing this not just alone, we've actually been working in partnership with other bodies. For example, the manufacturing and employers body called Make UK and also some leading sector skills councils. And we had a bit of press coverage in recent weeks around this, which was helpful, and we're going to continue with that campaign. I mean, the other kind of key issue is that sort of where apprentices haven't been made redundant, they've also faced real challenges in actually being able to continue with their training, to get their kind of final assessment done, because employers haven't actually been aware of the flexibilities. There's lots of flexibilities for apprentices to continue their apprenticeships using online systems, digital resources. For example, apprentices can continue their training while they're on furlough. They can also do their final kind of endpoint assessment online. And it's really frustrating that hasn't always been happening, because the regulations allow for it, but some employers just aren't aware of it. What we've been doing is very early on we've published guidance for union reps on the Union Learn website, sort of highlighting all the ways that actually apprentices can be facilitated to continue their training. It wasn't really helpful. The early government guidance was, I think, quite unhelpful. It's been revised on numerous occasions, but I think it's been important for us to actually support unions, to actually negotiate with employers, to actually make the case for apprentices to be able to actually continue with their training. The other thing we're trying to do at the moment is also sort of highlighting that there are some new incentives out there for young people in particular that can actually help them progress to a full apprenticeship. For example, the Kickstart program, the subsidised job program. We're making the case that actually employers should be looking for that 6-month job as a means of actually supporting people to go into permanent employment, and in many cases to go into permanent apprenticeship with the company. And there's other incentives. The government's offering financial incentives to employers at the moment, £2,000 to recruit young apprentices, and a bit less to recruit apprentices age over 25. So we'll actually sort of quite a lot of stuff on our website and in our policy newsletters about what all the new kind of incentives are. So it's a case of sort of safeguarding current apprentices and actually making the case for boosting the numbers that employers have recruited. So I'll stop there.
Great, thanks for that, Ian. And yeah, I'd certainly recommend people to have a look at the Union Learn website on the section on COVID-19 and apprenticeships. There's some really good advice and guidance there. And I know Mark from Wales TUC has also put up the link for their advice page on that. So there's a lot of good advice and guidance there. And in the latest Union Learn Learning and Skills policy newsletter. So thanks for that, Ian. Moving on to Carol, a question for you. How has the BFAWU been supporting its members facing redundancy, and what strategies for support have worked well, Carol?
Thanks, Ian. Morning, everybody. Before COVID, I always worked closely with my regional officer, Steve Finn. He would always let me know where redundancies were happening, secure me an attendance to a consultation meeting to discuss how we can help, and he would lead discussions in securing time off for them. Since COVID, we've had to think outside the box. We know that we still need to support our members, but we needed to do it remotely. I had an email from Greg's asking for help, so I consulted my project manager, Lisa Greenfield, and she said to work with my colleague, Karen Playson, so that we could work out the best strategy for doing it online. It was agreed that I put a list of questions together that we could ask people so that we could put their CVs together. I went onto the Money Advice website and I ordered redundancy handbooks, and they were delivered to the site. I emailed the questions over to the HR, and what she did was she sent them out to everybody that was being made redundant. Once she got the answers back in, she emailed them through to us. So we split the list up between me and Karen, and then we emailed them all individually, introducing ourselves, letting them know what we could do for them. We sent them the link to our BFAW IAG survey, so they completed that, and we could see their skills levels, and we could send through links to courses that could upskill them. We also explained that if we were sitting with them, we would get them to do the Union Learn skills check so that we could add them to the CV. So what we did was we enrolled them, we sent them the link, their username and their password. When they'd completed, we'd go back in, check their levels, add it to the CV, and also do a screen print so that they had it there for their evidence. At this point, we would also direct them to job search. And I know Karen worked really hard with one individual, getting her onto websites and getting her interviews secured. So she worked really hard on that. Well done, Karen. Once the CV is completed, we send it over to them. We get them to check it through, make sure we haven't made any mistakes, spelling mistakes. I do make them, even though I'm doing it on the computer. Once that's done, they get the final email. And what we do is we wish them good luck with their future, but we send them an interview skills pack. And what this does is it explains to them about what an advert means, what the application form looks like, what questions will be asked, and interview etiquette. Because some people, like, they've not had interviews for years. Some people haven't even had interviews. So it's something that they need to know. Because this is a very impersonal way of doing things, we tried to keep their experience like a good experience and make it count for them. We kept our emails light, we kept them friendly. I'm not saying this has been an easy process. A lot of time has been spent staring at a computer, but we've had some really good feedback, and that is what counts, what comes back from the people that we're helping. Thank you.
Great, Carol. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. Really sort of interesting sort of case study, and as you mentioned, presents even more challenges supporting people remotely. Pleased to hear that you use the Union Learn skill check tool. Just give a plug for that. People can find that on the Union Learn website. But it is really useful for finding that baseline for where people are at. And as you say, you know, some people may not have had interviews for years, so it's building that confidence is so important. And I think it's a good point about keeping emails light and friendly, and good to hear you've received lots of good positive feedback. So thanks for that. Moving back to Ian now. Question for you, Ian. What role can the National Retraining Scheme play in a skills-led recovery? And can you tell us more about some of the new skills and recovery resources that Union Learn are developing?
Okay, thanks, Ian. Well, first, maybe if I give a quick summary of what the National Retraining Scheme is, and maybe more importantly, what it hasn't been doing so far. It's been around for a few years. It was announced by the government nearly 3 years ago, and the background to the announcement was the kind of, you know, increasing concerns around sort of impact of automation on the jobs market, and how it was going to impact on people losing jobs, and that there was lots of calls by various stakeholders for government to be a bit more proactive in actually sort of designing and setting out a model for the National Retraining Scheme that would enable people to retrain to move into new jobs and new sectors in the face of some of the kind of major kind of changes coming down the tracks as a result of automation, artificial intelligence, and other kind of trends. One of the things we welcomed when they announced the National Retraining Scheme was they also established something called the National Retraining Partnership, and which brought government, TUC and CBI together to discuss development of the scheme. And we've continued to sort of work in partnership with the TUC and the Department for Education on sort of developing the model. There's been lots of different pilots been running over the last couple of years. For example, in about 6 parts of the country, there's been an online service called Get Help to Retrain that they've been testing out, and unions supported by Union Learn and employers supported by CBI have been actually sort of trying to get that out into workplaces. There's also been a number of pilots. For example, they've been piloting running pilots in some colleges, looking at what's the impact if you actually change the cost of courses, because, sort of cost is obviously a key barrier for adults who want to retrain. So there's been lots of stuff going on. And there is more information on the Union Learn website just about developments to date. And I must say, a lot of it has been around testing and sort of and piloting rather than actually launching any kind of major retraining program. The plans were that would happen this year, but with kind of political developments last year, change of government, etc., that didn't happen. And it's clear that plans for the National Retraining Scheme need to radically change for two reasons. I mean, one of them is political. The new government, have announced they're going to actually launch a new adult skills program next year called the National Skills Fund, and that the National Retraining Scheme is likely to be incorporated into that. I mean, one of the things we're saying to government is we can't wait till next year. They should be spending that money on the National Skills Fund, the 600 million per annum. They should be spending that now. And one of the things they should be doing is using that money to actually incorporate a retraining offer in the new proposal the TUC has set out, the Jobs Protection and Upskilling Plan, so we actually get retraining opportunities up and running as soon as possible. We're obviously in a different economic situation. The National Training Scheme was sort of dreamt up, looking at, to combat automation, and that's still very important, but we're now sort of in a completely different economic environment because as a result of the pandemic, and the urgency is to tackle unemployment over the coming weeks and months, as Kate has been highlighting. So we're making the case now through what the TUC is calling for to actually sort of get the government to actually sort of launch retraining opportunities as soon as possible to combat redundancy. I mean, we've also been calling for other skills policy to support a massive extension of retraining, including things like development of lifelong personal learning accounts, right to pay time off for training, and entitlement to regular kind of skills reviews, like building on the midlife reviews that Union Learning reps and Union Learn have been sort of testing out in the last few years. There's much more information about our policy asks, skills policy asks in our newsletter. But just turning to the last part of the question, a lot of this, we're calling for things, but we need to act now. And sort of unions are acting now because they're acting, they're negotiating with employers to prevent redundancies. They're negotiating with employers to support, people to upskill and reskill. And Union Learning reps are, playing a crucial role in that front. So there's a lot of stuff going on out there that we're supporting, which unions are doing on a day-to-day basis. And I assume many of the people who are logged into this webinar will be actually actively engaged in that. We have got this Recovery in Recession project, which Union Learn is sort of is running at the moment. It's developing new resources and new guides. For example, we're updating a guide we published, TUC and Union Learn published 10 years ago at the last recession, called Coping with Economic Downturn. And we have a website page on the Union Learn website that sort of gives lots more information about the resources that the Recovery in Recession project has available. As Ian highlighted at the beginning of the webinar, we've got the Learning at Home section of the Union Learn website, which has been sort of pushing out a lot of digital learning resources for union learners. I suppose the other part of it is something I mentioned in context of apprentices. Unions and union reps are negotiating with employers around Kickstart, and actually how can we actually make sure that actually sort of supports recovery for young people. So there's lots of stuff going on. I just would end by sort of flagging up, there's quite a lot of webinars and TUC online events coming in the coming weeks that will be actually sort of highlighting in more detail what's available through the project. I'll stop there.
Thanks for that, Ian, and that's really helpful, and particularly as well, touching on the work that's currently in development, Union Learn with the Skills and Recovery project. As you mentioned, there will be a new reps redundancy guide that will be available shortly. Hopefully that will be published the end of this month, and next month we have got the new Coping with the Economic Downturn guide, one that was produced about 10 years ago but has been updated now for reps and workers, that will be published in October, and the new Skills and Recovery landing page has now gone live on the Union Learn website, and I see Lou has given the link in the chat there. Just to say, keep an eye on that, because as new resources and materials develop, that's where they'll be posted up. So keep an eye on that. Thanks very much for that, Ian. I'd now like to move back to Kate, and Kate, a question for you. Where are the new future jobs likely to be created, and what new skills will workers need for those jobs, Kate?
Thanks, Ian. So we think that this should be a time when government is investing in creating new jobs, and we know, of course, that there's an awful lot that needs to be done. It's not like the country has run out of kind of urgent needs. And so one of our big calls from the TUC, alongside protecting jobs with the Jobs Protection and Upskilling Plan, has been investing in the creation of new jobs. And that's really in two big areas. One's kind of around kind of green infrastructure and kind of broader infrastructure. We know we've got the climate change emergency, basically, and we need to tackle that. But that should actually be an opportunity for government to be creating new jobs. So we had some research out that looked at the potential to invest in new jobs, and we talked about government investing billions over the next 2 years could create over 1 million jobs, and that's in a range of areas. You mentioned broadband, Ian. I think most people are now pretty convinced of the need for us, the country, to invest in better broadband, but we also found that could create around 40,000 new jobs. We found there was maybe up to kind of 500,000 jobs if we were to build the social housing we need, and also to make sure that's green social housing. There's lots of jobs available in the kind of electrification of our transport system we need, whether that's electric charging points for cars, actually real link into kind of our manufacturing industry and producing the kind of steel we need. All that's kind of building new electric buses. And we know we've got some of the skills we already need. Some of these are transferable skills. So, you know, people, the kind of classic one people talk about is, you know, people who've had an experience working on kind of oil rigs, being able to work on wind turbines. But there's lots of other skills which are kind of, we know people already have in terms of kind of planning, in terms of the construction skills, which could really be put to work, and maybe with a bit of adaptation, could be put to work on these new types of projects. The other thing we've been calling for is investment in the public sector. So everyone here will know we've had that decade of austerity where we've seen our public services really hit hard, and staff numbers too. The government actually told us it wants to end austerity, and we haven't seen the proof of that yet, but there's certainly a lot of jobs that could be created. We think there's around 220,000 jobs that are needed in social care. Those are jobs right across the country. And of course, we also need a big effort to make sure that our social care system is fit for purpose, that it has a kind of national training and progression scheme that looks more like the NHS. But that could be a source of, you know, if we invested in our social care system, that could be a source of good quality, good new jobs. We think there's about 135,000 vacancies at the moment in the health system, which we need to fill. Everybody here will probably know about kind of attacks to local government over the last decade, but around over 100,000 jobs that there could be in local government, 80,000 jobs in education, and we think around 50,000 jobs in the civil service and kind of broader public administration like Job Centre Plus. Again, lots of people will have good transferable skills that they need to do these jobs, but the kind of interventions we're calling for, like Ian was talking about, in terms of scaling up the National Retraining Partnership, should be being used to say, okay, where are the expanding areas in the place where people live, basically? So, you know, we need some kind of local delivery. Is it here that actually there's a new plant producing electric steel, for example? Or here actually, is this person, you know, who's maybe, I don't know, Carol, what your workers would be looking for, you know, new jobs in, but, you know, are there new opportunities in the social care system? Are there skills they've got that are transferable skills in terms of dealing with customers, that are actual people skills that they'd be able to take into those kind of public sector jobs? So we think kind of the first thing government needs to do is actually have a plan, basically, and say, okay, we know the country's got these big challenges. It's got this challenge of meeting meeting climate change, and we know we need to invest to do that. You know, government has said this, it's just not getting on with it. It's got this big challenge of rebuilding our public services, which has never been more evident. So first they need the plan, and then we can start to identify, you know, where are those jobs going to be located in the country? How can we provide the dedicated skills we need, working with trade unions, and make sure that people who do lose their jobs, if their companies go under, have got new, good quality jobs to go into.
Thanks for that, Kate. Yeah, some very important points there. You know, particularly about that the government needs a plan, but there is a huge challenge there, and in terms of rebuilding public services and investing in public services to ensure we have good quality, decent jobs. So, thank you for that. A final question for you, Carol. What advice or tips would you give to union reps that have members at risk of redundancy?
Redundancy support wasn't something that we were trained for. This just evolved out of necessity. We had to adapt so that we could help. We quickly realised that help was needed with interview skills, so we put a pack together. That is an ever-growing beast, because as I find different things, I keep adding it into it, so it's just getting bigger and bigger. Tips: do your homework. Talk to Job Centre Plus, find out what jobs are available within the area. Ask them to come to site. Some of them will come and they will do jobs fairs, and they will also do, some of them I've found have also do interview skills workshops, which is really good. Talk to agencies. Most companies now work with agencies. Find out if they'll come on site and do a workshop. Order books that can help people. Money Advice Service website is brilliant for this. The redundancy handbook that's on there is really good. And they do other things on there like universal credit, credit union, making the most of your money. And you can download these or you can order them. I think the most I've ordered at one point was 250. So you can order them from them as well, and they're all free. Make sure any equipment that you're using is working, any printing you need is up to date. If you don't have business cards, then do something that has got your contact details on, so that when people walk away, they've got your contact details. We all walk away from things and go, oh, I should have asked that question, or, you know, we all do that. So at least if they've got your contact details, they can ask any questions that they need. Setting up appointment systems is good as well. It focuses everybody's mind if you've got an appointment system. We left our appointment system to a company once, and we worked 8 hours solid with no breaks. That's quite challenging, but we changed all that around, so we do get breaks now. Patience. You need patience with people as well. I know it seems strange in this day and age, but not everybody's got an email address, and we need an email address for sending their CVs through to them. We started off by helping them set up an email address, but found that was quite problematic. So what we tend to do now is we talk to family members, they give us the phone, and we talk to family members and we get an email address where we can send things through to. Most of all, be friendly, be open, smile, you know, be the person that they want to come and talk to. Think about their mental health. This is a big one with this. These people that are being made redundant are feeling rejected, you know, and what you're going to say to them when you sit and talk to them can help build them back up again. Most importantly, think about your mental health. I remember once I was doing redundancy cover with a guy from Greggs. He'd been doing the same job for 34 years. He was so sweet. I walked away from him, got in my car, and I had a good cry. So remember your mental health in all this as well. It can affect your redundancies. If anybody's got any questions, one of my lot have put our website address in the chat bar. If anybody's got any questions, my contact details are on there. You know, just drop me an email and I can answer your questions, or I can put you in touch with somebody that's in your region that might be able to help. These are not normal times that we're living in, but we still need to support and help people with what we're doing, and we need to do it to our fullest extent. And we can only hope that the experience they have is not just a great one, but it's a productive one as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Carol. Some really good advice and some very helpful tips as well. Particularly about appointment systems, making sure you do have time, you do have breaks, and that. But particularly as well, particularly important point around mental health. Workers' mental health, particularly during these times of changes and the stress and anxiety that they're going through, but also your own mental health and well-being as well, particularly important. So thanks for that. You actually sort of answered answered one of these sort of questions that came up in the questions there about what you do if somebody hasn't got an email or an email account. So some really useful advice on that. I'd like to sort of move to some of the questions we've got and just sort of take a few of these. Maybe if we start, we've got one from Graham. Is this a good time to push harder for union representation on skills and job creation related bodies, in particular LEPs, Local and Regional Authority Recovery Commission, where union representation is either non-existent or minimal? Kate, would you like to pick up on that one?
Sure, definitely. Hi, Graham. So we have been pushing really hard to say union representation needs to go up, and initially we were calling, well, we're still really calling for a National Recovery Council, and we've been calling for that right from the beginning kind of the pandemic, without much success in getting government to listen to us. We also said that should be done on a regional level too, so there was somewhere where unions were coming together with business and local government to actually try and plan some of this advice, to draw on the experience and expertise of union reps, which and unions, which, as you've all seen today, is absolutely massive. I think we are now at a kind of regional level, just sort of trying to get in where we can, basically. So our regional secretary have had some success. I know they've been talking really closely in kind of the Northwest Combined Authority, so kind of in Liverpool and Manchester. They've had some good success actually being able to talk to local government about how they can give their advice, building on some of the work they've done previously with kind of employment charters and stuff. And I know kind of as I said, our regional offices are trying really hard to kind of get in there wherever we can, but they're a bit frustrated by the lack of a steer from government really telling them, actually, if you want to do this right, you need to be talked to unions, and that's what we're still pushing for nationally too.
Great, thanks for that, Kate. I've sort of a couple of questions I thought Ian, you might be able to answer. One from Val about how can you best help older workers over 50 who may have a large skills gap. And then there's also a question as well about the 20% off the job training for apprentices. Is this a common problem?
Okay, thanks, Ian. Helping older workers, well, I think sort of union learning reps have sort of developed sort of really sort of useful strategies over the years. I think I mentioned earlier the midlife review kind of process, which which has been around, I think, probably for the last decade, where it's about actually giving space to people and union reps or union learning reps sitting down and actually going through in a kind of supportive way. And some of the things that Carol has talked about around redundancy, but actually, giving people space, making them feel confident about having that conversation. And quite often, it's not a conversation they want to have with the HR or the one in the company. They would really welcome having that conversation with a colleague, and particularly if that colleague is a union learning rep or another kind of rep. And actually, I think sort of having a kind of a kind of fairly sort of open but systematic kind of a means of going through where that person is at the moment, jobs wise and careers wise, and also skills wise, and actually sort of putting together some kind of sort of plan. But I think it needs to be a plan that they think is manageable and that there's actually sort of incremental steps in that plan for them to actually sort of move on to achieve. So I think that there's lots of stuff on the Union Learn website around midlife reviews, and there's lots of people in Union Learn who are a lot more knowledgeable about this than me. But you know, I would suggest that you dip into some of these resources, because I think the midlife review model is a really helpful model for actually sort of for addressing people in that age group, especially those who are that sort of who are looking to actually change their careers. The off-the-job regulation around apprentices, I mean, having a right to 20% of their working time for off the job training. It's been around. It came in when the levy was introduced in 2017. We really strongly welcomed it, because we've had concerns over many years that we have got some world-class apprenticeships in this country, but we do have a long tail of very poor quality apprentices, many of whom are not getting any training. The latest survey by the government, which is based on a large survey of apprentices, this is a DFE report which came out this year, show that only 30% at the moment say they're getting the equivalent of 20% of the job training. So we're talking about nearly 3/4 of current apprentices saying they're not getting anything near that. So it's a real problem, and we've been calling for much stricter enforcement of that. It's been going on for years. We need to have a kind of system in place. We've got similar problems with contravention of the minimum wage in apprenticeships. We need a much stronger enforcement regime for apprenticeships to make sure that they're actually getting the pay that they're legally entitled to for a start, which is a bit of a shocking thing to say, but that is the reality for many apprentices. But that actually they're also getting at least 20% of their working time for training. And I think some of this probably harks back to some of what Kate was talking about, is that we don't really have any kind of national kind of, we don't have any national kind of partnership kind of bodies in this country, whether it's on skills or economic recovery, like you see in other European countries, like whether it's the German model or many, in many other European countries, where, unions and employers sit around the table and agree things about skills programs. So they agree things about how, national economic recovery programs, like Kate was talking about, and that actually filters down in these countries, so that actually there is stricter enforcement of sort of things like regulation of apprenticeships and other skills programs.
Thanks for that, Ian. Carol, just a sort of quick question for you. When you're talking about sort of the advice and tips for reps, just wondered if you've done much work in partnership with the National Career Service, and maybe some of the resources and materials that they provide.
Not really. We've had a look at some of this stuff and everything. It does look good, and we can point people in that direction. We've got a lot of courses that we're actually doing ourselves. We've got a platform that we're running called Litmus, and there's some good courses on there that like around interview skills and things like that. So we are pointing people sort of in that direction. And as I say, we go more with Job Centre Plus and get them to come on site and to do workshops, to talk to people, because they know what's going on in the area as well. So that's what we use more.
And that works for you, and the feedback you've had from you. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Carol. Brilliant. Well, thanks very much, everybody. I don't know if any of the panelists have got any sort of final comments or remarks that they would like to make. If not, I'll start to bring the thing to a close. But first of all, a big thank you to our three speakers this morning, and a big thank you to everybody who joined us today, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to participate in this webinar. We do hope that you found it a useful session. We will be adding the webinar to our YouTube channel, along with all the useful links to resources and publications that have been shared today and have been up in the chat forum. Finally, if you haven't already visited our Festival of Learning landing page, please take a look and sign up for some of the inspiring and interactive virtual sessions we will be delivering over the coming weeks. And please get involved and promote those to your learners and members. And yeah, finally, just leaves me to say thank you for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Thanks very much, everybody.